This happened a few years back. I was doing long haul, mostly cross country routes, the kind that take you to the vast stretches of nothing. You know the ones, where the radio turns to static for hours, and the only sign of life is the occasional pair of headlights going the other way, miles apart. I was young, eager for the miles, the money, and I didn't mind the solitude. Or so I thought. The route I was on took me across a long, desolate stretch of highway that ran between the borders of two large governmental territories. I don't want to say exactly where, but think big. Empty spaces, lots of trees, and not much else. It was notorious among drivers for being a dead zone. No signal, no towns for hundreds of miles on either side, and prone to bad weather. Most guys tried to hit it during the daylight, but schedules are schedules. Mine had me crossing it deep in the night. I remember the feeling. Utter blackness outside the sweep of my headlights, the kind of dark that feels like it's pressing in on the cab. The only sounds were the drone of the diesel engine and the hiss of the air brakes now and then, and the rhythmic thrum of the tires on the asphalt. Hypnotic. Too hypnotic. I'd been driving for about 10 hours, with a short break a few states back. Coffee was wearing off. The dashboard lights were a dull green glow, comforting in a way, but also making the darkness outside seem even more absolute. My eyelids felt like they had lead weights attached. You fight it, you know? Slap your face, roll down the window for a blast of cold air, crank up whatever music you can find that hasn't dissolved into static. I was doing all of that. It must have been around 2 or 3 a.m. I was in that weird state where you're not quite asleep, but not fully awake either. Like your brain is running on low power mode. The white lines on the road were starting to blur together, stretching and warping. Standard fatigue stuff. I remember blinking hard and trying to focus. That's when I saw it. Or thought I saw it. Just a flicker at the edge of my headlights on the right shoulder of the road. Small, low to the ground for a split second. I registered a shape, vaguely human-like, and then it was gone, swallowed by the darkness as I passed. My first thought, deer, or coyote. Common enough, but it hadn't moved like an animal. It had been upright. My brain, sluggish as it was, tried to process it. Too small for an adult, too still for an animal startled by a rig. Then, the logical part, the part that was still trying to keep me safe on the road, chimed in. You're tired, seeing things. It happens. And I almost accepted that. I really did. Shook my head, took a swig of lukewarm water from the bottle beside me, and I kept my eyes glued to the road ahead. The image, though, it kind of stuck. A small, upright shape, like a child. No way, I told myself. Out here, in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the night? Impossible. Kids don't just wander around the interterritorial highways at 3 a.m. It had to be a trick of the light, a bush, my eyes playing games. I've seen weirder things born of exhaustion, shadows that dance, trees that look like figures. It's just part of the job when you're pushing limits. I drove on for maybe another 30 seconds, the image finally fading. My rational brain started to win, just a figment. Then, I glanced at my passenger side mirror. Habit, always checking, and my blood went cold. No, not just cold. It felt like it turned to slush. There, illuminated faintly by the red glow of the trailer lights receding into the distance, was the reflection of the small figure standing on the shoulder of the road, exactly where I'd thought I'd seen something. It wasn't a bush, it wasn't a shadow. It was small, and it was definitely standing there, unmoving as my truck pulled further and further away. My heart started hammering against my ribs. This wasn't fatigue. This was real. There was someone, something back there, and it looked tiny. Every instinct screamed at me, danger, wrong, keep going, but another voice, the one that makes us human, I suppose, whispered something else. A kid? Alone? Out there? What if they're hurt? What if they're lost? I fought with myself for a few seconds that felt like it stretched into an eternity. The image in the mirror was getting smaller, fainter. If I didn't act now, they'd be lost into the darkness again. God, the thought of leaving a child out there, if that's what it was. Against my better judgment, against the primal urge to just floor it, I made the decision. I slowed the rig, the air brakes hissing like angry snakes, pulled over to the shoulder, the truck groaning in protest. I put on my hazards. their rhythmic flashing cutting into the oppressive blackness. Then I did what you're never supposed to do with a full trailer on a narrow shoulder. I started to reverse, slowly, carefully, my eyes flicking between the mirrors, trying to keep the trailer straight, trying to relocate that tiny figure. The crunch of gravel under the tires sounded unnaturally loud. It took me a minute, maybe two, but it felt like an hour. The red glow of my taillights eventually washed over the spot again, and there it was, a kid. I stopped the truck so my cab was roughly alongside them, maybe 10 feet away. I switched on the high beams, hoping to get a better look, and also to make myself clearly visible as just a truck, not something else. The kid was small, really small. I guess maybe 6, 7 years old. Hard to tell in the glare. They were just standing there, on the very edge of the gravel shoulder, right where the trees began. The woods pressed in close on this stretch of road. Tall, dark pines and the dense undergrowth that looked like a solid black wall just beyond the reach of my lights. The kid wasn't looking at me. They were facing sort of parallel to the road, just walking slowly like they were on a stroll, completely oblivious to the massive 18-wheeler that just pulled up beside them. Engine rumbling, lights blazing. They were just wearing what looked like pajamas, thin, light-colored pajamas, in the chill of the night. No coat or shoes that I could see. My mind reeled. This was wrong. So many levels of wrong. I killed the engine. The sudden silence was almost deafening, amplifying the crickets, the rustle of the leaves in the woods from the breeze that I couldn't feel in the cab. My heart was still thumping, a weird mix of fear, adrenaline, and the dawning sense of responsibility. I rolled down the window. The night air hit me, cold and damp, carrying the scent of pine and wet earth. "Hey," I called out. My voice sounded hoarse, too loud in the quiet. "Hey kid." No response. They just kept walking, one small bare foot in front of the other, at a pace that was taking them absolutely nowhere fast. Their head was down, slightly. I couldn't see their face properly. "Kid, are you okay?" I tried again, louder this time. Slowly, so slowly, the kid stopped. They didn't turn their head fully, just sort of angled it at a fraction, enough that I could see a pale silver cheek in the spill of my headlights. Still not looking at me, still ignoring the multi-ton machine idling beside them. A prickle of unease ran down my spine, not the normal kind of unease. This was deeper, colder. Animals act weird sometimes, but kids? A lost kid should be scared, relieved, something. This one was nothing. "What are you doing out here all alone?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm, friendly, like you're supposed to with a scared kid. Even though this one didn't seem scared at all. It's the middle of the night. Silence. Just the sound of their bare feet scuffling softly on the gravel as they took another step. Then another. As if my presence was a minor inconvenience, a background noise they were choosing to ignore. This wasn't right. My internal alarm bells were clanging louder now. My hand hovered near the gear stick. Part of me wanted to slam it into drive and get the hell out of there. But the image of this tiny child alone, possibly in shock, I couldn't just leave, could I? "Where are your parents?" I pushed, my voice a bit sharper than I intended. "Are you lost?" Finally, the kids stopped walking completely. They turned their head just a little more, still not looking directly at my cab, more towards the front of my truck, into the glare of the headlights. I could see their face a bit better now. Pale, featureless, in the harsh light, like a porcelain doll. Small, dark smudges that might have been eyes. No expression, none. Not fear, not sadness, not relief. Just blank. Just an unreadable slate. Then, a voice. Small, thin, like the rustle of the dry leaves. "Lost." Just that one word, it hung in the air between us. Relief washed over me, quickly followed by a fresh wave of concern. Okay, lost. That's something I can deal with. "Okay, kid, lost is okay. We can fix lost. Where do you live? Where were you going?" The kid finally slowly turned their head fully towards my cab, towards me. I still couldn't make out much detail in their face. The angle, the light, something was obscuring it, keeping it sort of a shadowy vagueness despite the headlights. But I could feel their gaze. It wasn't like a normal kid's look. There was weight to it, an intensity that was deeply unsettling for such a small form. Home, the kid said in the same thin, reedy voice, trying to get home. Right, home. Where is home? I asked, leaning forward a bit, trying to project reassurance. Is it near here? Did you wander off from a campsite? A car? There were no campsites for miles, no broken down cars on the shoulder. I knew that. The kid didn't answer that question directly. Instead, they took a small step towards the truck, then another. My hand tensed on the door handle, ready to open it, to offer what? A ride? Shelter? I didn't know. It's cold out here, I said, stating the obvious. You should get in. We can get you warm, and I can call for help when we reach a spot with a signal. My CB was useless, just static. My phone had shown no service for the last hour. The kid stopped about 5 feet from my passenger door, still in that pale, thin, pajama-like outfit, barefoot on the sharp gravel. They should be shivering, crying. They were doing neither. Can you help me? The kid asked. The voice was still small, but there was a different inflection to it now, less flat, a hint of something else. Pleading, maybe. Yeah, of course I can help you, I said. That's why I stopped. Where are your parents? How did you get here? The kid tilted their head, a jerky, unnatural little movement. They're waiting at home. Okay, and where is home? Which direction? I gestured vaguely up and down the empty highway. The kid didn't point down the road. They made a small, subtle gesture with their head, a little nod towards the trees, towards the impenetrable darkness of the woods lining the highway. In there, the kid said. My stomach clenched. In the woods? Your home is in the woods? Lost, the kid repeated, as if that explained everything. Trying to find the path. It's dark. Yeah, it's very dark, I agreed, my eyes scanning the tree line. It looked like a solid wall of black. No sign of any path, any habitation. Just a dense, old-growth forest, the kind of place you could get lost in for days, even in the daylight. Can you come out? The kid asked. Help me look. It's not far. I can't see it from here. Every rational thought in my head screamed no. Get out of the truck in the middle of nowhere in the pitch dark with this strange child who wanted me to go into the woods? No, absolutely not. But the kid looked so small, so vulnerable. If there was even a tiny chance they were telling the truth, that their house was just a little ways in, and they were genuinely lost, I don't think that's a good idea, buddy, I said, trying to sound gentle. It's dangerous in there at night, for both of us. Best thing is for you to hop in here with me, and we'll drive until we get signal, and then we'll call the police, or the rangers. They can help you find your home, properly. The kid just stood there, that blank, unreadable face fixed on me. But it's right there, they insisted, their voice a little more insistent now. Just a little way. I can almost see it. If you just step out, the light from your door would help. My skin was crawling. There was something profoundly wrong with this scenario. The way they were trying to coax me out, the lack of normal emotional response, the pajamas, the bare feet, the woods. I looked closer at the kid, trying to pierce the strange vagueness around their features. My headlights were bright, but it was like they absorbed the light rather than reflected it. Their eyes, I still couldn't really see their eyes, just dark hollows. I really think you should get in the truck, I said, my voice firmer now. It's warmer in here. We can figure it out together. The kid took another step closer. They were almost at my running board now. Please, they said. That reedy voice again. My leg hurts. I can't walk much further. If you could just help me a little, just to the path. My internal conflict was raging. My trucker instincts, honed by years of seeing weird stuff and hearing weirder stories at truck stops, were blaring warnings. But the human part, the part that saw the child in distress, was still there, still arguing. I was tired, so damn tired. Maybe I wasn't thinking straight. Maybe this was all some bizarre misunderstanding. I squinted, trying to see past the kid, towards the tree line they'd indicated. Was there a faint trail that I was missing? A flicker of light deep in the woods? No, nothing. Just blackness. Solid, unyielding blackness. And then I saw it. It wasn't something I saw clearly at first. It was more like an anomaly, a disturbance in the darkness behind the kid. The kid was standing there with their back mostly to the woods, facing my truck. Behind them, The darkness of the forest was absolute, or it should have been, but there was something connected to them, something that stretched from the small of their back, from under the thin pajama top, and disappeared into the deeper shadows of the trees. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, a weird shadow cast by the headlight, hitting them at an odd angle. Maybe a rope they were dragging, a piece of clothing snagged on a branch. I leaned forward, trying to get a clearer view. The kid was still talking. Their voice was a low, persistent murmur. "It's not far. Please just help me. I'm so cold." But I wasn't really listening to the words anymore. I was focused on that thing behind them. It wasn't a rope. It wasn't a shadow. It was a tube. A long, dark, thick tube. It seemed to emerge directly from the kid's lower back, impossibly, seamlessly. It was dark, matte, like a strip of the night itself given form, and it snaked away from the child, maybe 10, 15 feet before disappearing into the inky blackness between the two thick pine trunks. It seemed to have a slight, almost imperceptible flexibility, like a massive, sluggish umbilical cord made of shadow. It didn't reflect any light from my headlamps, it just absorbed it. My breath hitched in my throat. My blood, which had been cold before, now felt like it had frozen solid. This wasn't wrong. This was impossible, unnatural. The kid was still trying to coax me. "Are you going to help me? It's just there. You're so close." My voice, when I finally found it, was barely a whisper. I couldn't take my eyes off of that appendage. "Kid, what is that behind you?" The kid flinched. Not a big movement, just a tiny, almost imperceptible tightening of their small frame. Their head, which had been tilted pleadingly, straightened. The blankness on their face seemed to solidify. "What's what?" they asked, their voice suddenly devoid of that pleading tone. It was flat again, colder this time. That thing," I stammered, pointing with a shaking finger. "Coming out of your back, going into the woods. What is that?" The kid didn't turn to look. They didn't need to. Their gaze, those dark, unseen eyes, bored into me. "It's nothing," they said. The voice was still small, but it had a new edge to it, a hardness. "You're seeing things. You're tired." They were using my own earlier rationalization against me. "No," I said, my voice gaining a tremor of conviction, born of sheer terror. "No, I'm not. I see it. It's right there. It's connected to you." The kid was silent for a long moment. The only sound was the thumping of my own heart, so loud I was sure they could hear it. The crickets had stopped. The wind seemed to have died down. An unnatural stillness fell over the scene. Then the kid's face began to change. It wasn't a dramatic movie monster transformation. It was far more subtle and far more terrifying. The blankness didn't leave, but it sharpened. The pale skin seemed to have tightened over the bones. The areas where the eyes were, those dark smudges, seemed to deepen, to become more shadowed, more intense, and the flicker of something ancient and utterly alien passed across their features. It wasn't human anger, it was something older, colder, and infinitely more patient, now strained to its limit. The air in my cab suddenly felt thick, heavy, hard to breathe. "Just come out of the truck," the kid said. And the voice, oh God, the voice. It wasn't the small, reedy voice of a child anymore. It was deeper, resonant with a strange, grating undertone, like stones grinding together. It was coming from that small frame, but it was impossibly large, impossibly old. It vibrated my entire chest. "Come out now." The command was absolute. My hand, which had been hovering on the gear stick, now gripped it like a lifeline. My other hand fumbled for the ignition key, which I had stupidly left in. "What are you?" I choked out, staring at the monstrous thing playing dress-up in a child's form, at the dark, pulsating tube that was its anchor to the shadows. The kid's head tilted again, that jerky, unnatural movement. The expression on its face, if you could call it that, was one of pure, unadulterated annoyance, contempt, like I was a particularly stupid insect it had failed to swat. And then it spoke in that same terrible, resonant, grinding voice. The words it said are burned into my memory, colder than any winter night. "Why?" it rasped. The sound seemed to scrape the inside of my skull. Are humans so much smarter now? That was it. That one sentence, the sheer cosmic frustration in it, the implication of past encounters of easier prey, the utter alien nature of it. I didn't think. I didn't plan. I reacted. Primal fear, the kind that bypasses all higher brain function, took over. My hand twisted the key. The diesel engine roared back to life. A sudden violent explosion of sound in the horrifying stillness. The kid, the thing, actually recoiled. A small jerky step back. The expression, that awful, tightened, ancient look, intensified. I slammed the gear stick into drive. My foot stomped on the accelerator. The truck lurched forward, tires spinning on the gravel for a terrifying second before they bit into the asphalt. I didn't look at it. I couldn't. I stared straight ahead, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, the whole cab vibrating around me. The truck surged forward, gaining speed with agonizing slowness. For a horrible moment, I imagined that tube thing whipping out and trying to snag the trailer, to pull me back, to drag me into those woods. I imagined the small figure with his ancient, terrible voice somehow keeping pace. I risked a glance in my driver's side mirror. It was just standing there, on the shoulder, unmoving. The headlights of my departing truck cast its small silhouette into sharp relief, and behind it, the dark tube was still visible. A thick, obscene cord snaking back into the endless night of the forest. It didn't seem to be retracting or moving. It just was. The thing didn't pursue. It just stood and watched me go. And that, somehow, was almost worse. The sheer confidence, the patience, like it knew there would be others, or maybe it was just annoyed that this particular attempt had failed. I drove. I don't know for how long. I just drove. My foot was welded to the floor. The engine screamed. I watched the speedometer needle climb, far past any legal or safe limit for a rig that size. On a road that dark, I didn't care. The image of that thing, that child shape with its dark umbilical to the woods, and that voice, that awful grinding voice asking its horrifying question, was burned onto the inside of my eyelids. I must have driven for an hour, maybe more, at speeds that should have gotten me killed or arrested before the adrenaline started to fade, replaced by a bone-deep shaking and exhaustion that was more profound than any fatigue I had ever known. My hands were trembling so violently I could barely keep the wheel straight. Tears were streaming down my face, not from sadness, but from sheer, unadulterated terror and relief. When the first hint of dawn started to gray the eastern sky and my phone finally beeped, indicating a signal bar of service, I pulled over at the first wide spot I could find. I practically fell out of the cab, vomiting onto the gravel until there was nothing left but dry heaves. I sat there on the cold ground, shaking for a long time, watching the sun come up, trying to convince myself that it all had been a dream, a hallucination brought on by exhaustion. But I knew it wasn't. The detail of that tube, the voice, the question, you don't hallucinate something that specific, that coherent, that utterly alien. I never reported it. Who would I report it to? What would I say? Officer, I saw a little kid who was actually an ancient cosmic horror tethered to the woods by a nightmare umbilical cord, and it got mad because I didn't want to be its dinner. They'd have locked me up, breathalyzed me, drug tested me, sent me for a psych eval. I finished that run on autopilot, dropped the load, drove my rig right back to the yard, and I quit. I told them I was burned out and needed a break. They tried to convince me to stay, offered me a different route, more pay. I just couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that kid, that tube, those woods. Every dark road felt like a trap. I found a local job, something that keeps me home at night. I don't drive in remote areas anymore if I can help it, especially not at night. I still have nightmares sometimes. When I'm very tired, driving home late from somewhere, I'll see a flicker at the edge of my vision on the side of the road, and my heart will try to beat its way out of my chest. I don't know what that thing was. An alien? A demon? Something else? Something that doesn't fit into our neat little categories? All I know is that it's out there, and it's patient, and it seems to have learned that its old tricks aren't as effective as they used to be. Why are humans smarter now? That question haunts me. It implies they weren't always. It implies that once upon a time we were easier, that maybe, just maybe, people like me, tired and alone on dark roads, used to just step out of the cab when asked and were never seen again. So, if you're ever driving one of those long, lonely stretches of road, deep in the night, and you see something you can't explain, maybe just keep driving. Maybe being smarter now means knowing when not to stop, knowing when to ignore that little voice that's telling you to help, because what's asking for help might not be what it seems. Stay safe out there, and for God's sake, stay on well-lit roads. This happened in the late 90s. I worked for a company that owned a Caterpillar D9 bulldozer. It weighed just over 100,000 pounds, and it wasn't common for them to move the dozer off the property, but they had the means to do it. Their means to do it was a 1980-something International tractor with a drop trailer. Both were bought specifically to move this dozer. Both had seen much better days. Both were functional and safe as they could be. They were just used hard. The tractor had a couple few 100,000 miles on it, but that isn't odd for old tractors. We hadn't used the dozer to its full potential for a while, so the owner of the company had lent it out to one of his partners. I was basically hired to operate earth-moving equipment. My truck driving experience was just a perk. They asked me to deliver it, and I agreed. We load up the dozer, secure it to the trailer, and I was on my way. The CB antenna hadn't been tuned in forever, so I was only picking up short range with a lot of static. Weather conditions were cold, with light snowfall reports of ice on the road in certain areas. I slapped the oversized load banners on the dozer, and off we go. One of the intersections of the state route that I was on was notoriously bad. The intersection is at the base of a hill, and if you're coming from the side that the hill is on, you don't see the stoplight or the stopped traffic until you get over the peak of the hill. That being said, you usually still have plenty of room to stop. As I was approaching this intersection, the CB lit up, and the guy was basically screaming into it for traffic at the peak of this hill to slow down. The problem was that my CB wasn't tuned. Reception was sketchy, and I only caught about every third word. I know the intersection, so I let off the accelerator when I peaked the hill, mostly because I hated the hill, and I still hate that intersection. I would have had plenty of time to stop, even with the road conditions, if the traffic was normal. Unfortunately, traffic was not normal. There was a fresh, pretty bad accident at the intersection, and the traffic had been backed up for more than halfway up the hill. The accident had just occurred, so there were no emergency services on scene yet. I now had very little space to stop a very heavy load with a very old truck. I started downshifting and braking, but I quickly realized I was going to be cutting it very close and started braking harder. Then I realized I was hitting a large patch of ice on the road. The tires were slipping and jerking the tractor around. I heard the fifth wheel clanking, and I felt the trailer tugging on the tractor in a weird way, so I glanced at my driver's side mirror and I didn't see anything, including the dozer. In a panic, I whipped my head around to look at the passenger mirror, and the only thing that I saw was the entire side profile of the trailer and the dozer. I had made a terrible mistake in letting that trailer get out from behind me. It was one of those, well, I guess this is how I die moments. I was now jackknifing while still moving and trying to slow the truck down while on an icy hill. I was headed for the intersection full of stopped passenger cars, and my truck weighed a lot. By this point, I was thoroughly convinced that I was about to involuntarily murder a bunch of people. I laid on the horn as much as I could, but I was also trying to work the steering wheel in an attempt to pretend that I had control. Honestly, I hit a point where I basically realized I was just a passenger standing on the brake pedal. I didn't have enough room to correct anything, so I just went all out on the horn. The trailer tires finally heated up enough to start making a very loud and deep squeal. As the people in front of me realized, there were a bunch of them that got out of their cars and ran away. They were basically staring at an out-of-control death coming down the hill. The truck finally came to a stop within 3 feet of the last car in the intersection. I could sit on my truck's bumper and easily put my feet up on the car's bumper. The truck stopped with the trailer jackknifed, so I was blocking both lanes and the breakdown lane. I was drenched in sweat and shaking uncontrollably from the anxiety. As I was sitting in the now stopped truck, the people who had abandoned their cars were now screaming at me, pointing up the hill. I looked up the hill to see another tractor, but a tank trailer, basically reliving everything I just had with much less space to work with due to my trailer blocking so much of the road. I got out of my truck and ran away from it. The second truck slid down, stopped, and parallel parked almost perfectly with my truck. Once his truck stopped, I could see that he was experiencing the same thing I was. We were both extremely close to being in bad accidents, and thankfully, he was pulling a dry tank. I'm pretty sure that's the only reason he was able to stop. He was running much lighter than I was. By this time, the guy on the CB got through to enough truckers at the top of the hill that they basically slowed everyone else down. Once the adrenaline wore off, I almost passed out. I have operated a lot of different vehicles in my life, and that situation was easily the most scary operating situation I have ever lived. I had absolutely zero control over the situation, and that's a bad feeling for an operator. I remember the people that ran away from their cars were now comforting me. It's been over 20 years since that happened, and I still get the willies when I think about it. I've seen enough accidents to know how that could have turned out. Had I not been able to get that truck to stop, I would have ripped through all of those passenger vehicles with very little resistance. Another 5 miles per hour, or being in a different lane, just a bit more ice, even the time of day, would have completely changed the outcome of that situation, and it would have been entirely my fault. Driving through Idaho in the dead of night, and there was this biker who had been following me for the last 50 miles. When you drive, sometimes it's just you and someone else for long stretches. I call them road buddies, and he was my road buddy. I don't know when it happened, but I checked my mirror and he wasn't there anymore. There wasn't really anywhere for him to turn off, but maybe he pulled over for one reason or another. I looked back up and there was a biker in front of me now. I don't know if it was the same guy or not, and again, there's not really anywhere to pull over. It's just a bunch of flat, dry land with simple fencing on either side. I follow the guy for a mile or so, when all of a sudden he pitches hard right, like he just took a pothole in the worst way possible. I saw him tumble and watched his bike kick up a huge cloud of dust. We're not supposed to pull over or pick up hitchhikers, but in this kind of situation, I don't care what the company protocol says. I pulled right over and got out. I left the keys in it and everything. I walked back. It must have been at least a quarter of a mile or more. I couldn't find hide nor hair of him or his bike. There were no marks from where he pulled off and no potholes either. I walked around calling out to him in the dark for what felt like half an hour before walking back to my truck. When I climbed in, there he was, sitting in my passenger seat. He was covered in blood, twigs, and dirt. His leg looked like it had been severely broken, and he had taken off his belt to make a tourniquet. His middle through pinky fingers were pushed back and standing straight up, like they had been snapped backwards. I asked him if he was okay, but he didn't say anything. He just sat there, silent. I tried to touch his shoulder to see if he was even awake, but his jaw fell open and he let loose a hideous scream that still chills me to this day. His head fell forward, almost smashing it off my dash. I screamed and fell backwards out of my truck, landing hard on the gravel. When I looked back up into the cab, it was empty. No biker, just the faint smell of something burnt, like engine oil and firecrackers. I sat there shaking for what felt like forever before I finally got the courage to climb back into the cab and radio it in. About 20 minutes later, a state trooper pulled up behind me. He looked me over and asked me one question that caught me off guard. "You saw him, huh?" My eyes widened. I thought I misheard, but then he said it again, slower this time. "You saw him? Leather jacket, busted leg, fingers all jacked up?" I nodded, barely able to speak. He just let out a slow breath and leaned back against my truck, rubbing the back of his neck like he'd just heard something he really didn't want to deal with again. "You're not the first, you won't be the last," he muttered. "Every few months, someone comes out through this stretch and sees him. Always the same story, always the same injuries. The guy died out here about 10 years ago. Single vehicle crash. They said he must have laid there for hours, trying to crawl back to the road, but he bled out in the dirt." The trooper stared out into the dark. "They say, if you don't stop, he'll follow you for miles. And if you do stop," he trailed off and looked at me, dead serious. "Well, you already know what happens when you stop." I sat there, stunned, gripping the wheel like it was the only solid thing in the world. The trooper didn't file a report, didn't even ask for my license, just said, "Keep driving, and next time, don't stop." Ever since that night, I take the long way around. It adds hours to my route, but I don't care. I don't drive through Idaho anymore. Not at night, not ever.